Well, hello. Welcome to the Creative Writing Life podcast, where we talk with writers from all mediums and genres about themselves, their work, and advice they have for other writers. I'm your host, Paul Zibin, and my guest today is John Robert Still, and we're going to be talking to him today about his book, Intercessor. I'm not even going to try to describe it because we don't have that much time. But John, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me. It's my first podcast, so
Well,
bear with me.
I'm exciting to be your first, so I'll try to make it a good one for you. And as viewers and listeners are familiar, we like to start things off talking about things we may have read or watched lately. Did we like them? Do we hate them? Or we don't ever want to have anything to do with that
Right.
subject material ever again? I'll go first just to give John a little
Okay.
time to collect his thoughts. We are recording this right after Memorial Day weekend. And so my local neighborhood theater, they had the Alfred Hitchcock Festival.
Hmm.
And that was a blast. A lot of the movies I've already seen, but I think can't even remember the last time I've seen any of them on the big screen. So we went to go see Dial M for Murder,
Oh,
and
wow.
that was
Yeah.
fantastic as always. And then we saw Shadow of a Doubt. And part of the reason we like it so much, not just because it's a great movie, but it also takes place in Santa Rosa, which is just north of San Francisco. So it was
Oh, wow.
interesting to see all the locations and try to think, okay, do I know that building? Is that building even still there anymore? But just great stuff all around because you can't go wrong with the Hitchcock movies. John, how about you?
Well, I was thinking about that. I haven't really watched any movies that recently. I've been reading books lately, and I have watched the series Bosch. Just started watching
Sure.
that again. Good diversion, entertaining. Listening to a few books. I'm currently reading a book about Robin Williams called Robin,
Hmm.
and really interesting guy. I'm just about halfway through it. Um, got through listening to what was it called? It was based on David Copperfield, Demon Copperhead. Listened to that on Audible. It was really good. In fact, I started reading it, and I just didn't pick up on it, and I didn't really catch my interest. And then I listened to it on Audible. All the difference in the world. I don't know why, but
Hmm.
it was a very good book. Very long, but very good.
Yeah, maybe it's just the way the narrator slash reader was doing their
Yeah,
delivery.
yeah, he was fantastic actually. So, and
That's
I
great.
did read the original David Copperfield, one of my favorite books as well. So,
Uh-huh. All right, fantastic. Good stuff.
yeah,
Okay, so John, let us first, we're going to read the bio from your book, Intercessor, which
okay.
is a novel, as it says on the cover here. John Robert Still is a husband, godfather, friend, and lawyer. He loves good food, good wine, and even better cigars. He grows and rolls his own. When not fumbling with new hobbies, beekeeping being the latest, well, at least it was when he wrote this, look for him in the kitchen cooking jambalaya and other Cajun and Creole dishes, or in New Orleans eating them. He resides in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, with his wife Shirley and dog Georgie. So, John, let's talk a little bit about you. I mean, what's your background? I mean, you kind of touched on the surface here. I mean, have you always had a hankering for writing? Were you a voracious reader as a child?
That's a good question, Paul. I was never that much of a voracious reader. Never thought about writing a book, frankly. But um, I went to law school. I think that helped with my writing skills. And actually, the way I started this book, I think it was 2017. I was leaving a restaurant on Bourbon Street, and it had just rained. It was just, it looked like a movie set. And I thought, well,
Hmm.
this would be the great beginning of a really bad novel. All the world needs is another lawyer to write a novel. But then I just kept writing, and I wrote 90% of it on my phone with my thumb. So,
Wow.
uh, over the course of a couple years,
Hmm.
I wrote here and there. I did not just sit down at the keyboard, so I didn't really have writer's block. But that's the way it happened. It's hard to explain, but I mean, it just happened.
Okay, no, sometimes that's where inspiration comes from. It just happens.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your book, Intercessor. So what was, I mean, beyond the rainy streets of the French Quarter, what was the inspiration for this story? So, I mean, did you just think, okay, and also I want to really emphasize this, that New Orleans plays a huge role in this story.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I wanted. Yeah, I really wanted to capture the atmosphere of New Orleans because it's my favorite city.
Hmm.
Um, and so, you know, I uh, I started writing it about New Orleans, and I wasn't sure where it was going to go. And I had a friend who also writes, and she said maybe you should write about the Virgin Mary, right? Or and I want to explain this is how would you describe this book, Paul? Is that
I'm glad you asked that. I actually wrote that down. I called it a supernatural thriller with elements of faith and spirituality.
perfect? Perfect.
And yes,
Um,
you can use that in your marketing.
well, thank you. I appreciate it. So I had just gotten back from Bosnia. I went over there for a kind of pilgrimage. I was like Jim in the book, kind of, you know, searching. I was raised Catholic, and I went to mass, but I just, it, I was, I won't say I was necessarily dry in my faith, but I started reading about all these Marian apparitions, like at Fatima, and and I stumbled across this book called The Miracle Detective, and it was by Randall Sullivan, I believe. And he was a former editor of the Rolling Stone magazine, and he went
Mhm.
over there. He heard about it, and he came at it through the eyes of a skeptic, and he went through all the different apparitions of Mary and everything else. And so, it just just a spur of the moment decision, I decided to go over there to Medjugorje, which is kind of a hard name to pronounce. And so I went over there and kind of revitalized my faith. And so that was a part of that was I was more inspired by that subject at that time than anything else. And so I just kind of worked my way into that, and I incorporated all these mysterious elements. I like a good ghost story.
Hmm.
I like a journey, and uh, Jim is on this journey where he meets these interesting people and goes through these interesting events, and that's it. Just kept going, and so
Hmm.
originally that was my inspiration was my faith, I guess.
Okay, no problem. And you've touched on that a little bit. So what would you say is your what we like to call the elevator pitch? You've got 5 to 10 seconds. Someone says, "Oh, you're at a cocktail party," and says, "Oh, what do you do?" And say, "Oh, I just wrote this book." And they say, "Oh, what is it about?" And you would describe it as
I would
not
say
just what I said before, but like a little hint of the story type of
sure.
thing.
I'd say it's a spiritual thriller that it involves a journey. If you like New Orleans, you'll like this book. It has elements of a ghost story. It's a story of redemption, of self discovery. Um, so that's I guess that would be the best way to describe it. A lawyer goes to New Orleans. He's burnt out, and he encounters all kinds of interesting experiences as a hurricane's bearing down on the city, and just creates all kinds of interesting experiences and opportunities. So, uh, not sure if that's the best description, but
No,
that's
no,
what comes to
that because because you don't want to be too specific, but you also want to be too vague. You want to
mind. Right, right.
entice that potential reader. So, I guess the next question is, what was the process for developing the story? I mean, you said you wrote it over a couple of years on your phone. Was it the supernatural elements first, or was it the religious aspect second, or was it just kind of like a little sprinkling of everything all at once?
Well, it was actually the supernatural elements at first. Basically, focusing on New Orleans and and there's a really rich history of the supernatural and mysticism.
Hmm.
And so I was focusing on that. I really wanted to capture, as I said, the atmosphere of New Orleans, and then, um, and then the religious element came into it because it blended really well with it because New Orleans is steeped in Catholicism,
Right.
and there's all kinds of there's good and evil. There's all you get tarot card readers on one side, and you got the church on the other side where they're out. I think it's Jackson Square, I think is what it's called.
Hmm.
But yeah, so the first thing that came to mind was the supernatural elements of
And
the
then you
story.
started incorporating the religious aspects just because you were taking advantage of where the story was set,
Yes,
I'm guessing.
exactly. And I knew about Our Lady of Prompt Succor, and so I knew it was uptown, and so I knew that I wanted to get this guy. I thought I had the ending, and then when I
Hmm.
got to where the ending was going to be, I just I said no, no, I'll keep going, and so and as I wrote, and I didn't really have an outline. I just
Oh, okay.
had an idea of where I wanted to go, and then and as I wrote it became I just got more creative, and ideas came to me.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because we've had guests on before. Like I'm a strict outliner. Like I can't just
Yeah.
dive right into a script and just write, just write rights
Right.
or write pages, that I have to outline like crazy so I know where things are going. But it sounds like you didn't really start out with the intention of, as we like to call it, pantsing your way through it,
Right.
writing by the seat of your pants. But it's almost like it sounds like the characters were telling you this is where we need to go. Or I guess primarily Jim, the main character, was kind of like, okay, John, this is what needs to happen. You got to get me there.
Exactly. I remember going to William Faulkner's house. I'm not sure if you've been there, and he had an out. I forgot what book. Every wall in his room he wrote like outline form of where the book was going. But and that's what it comes to mind when I think of outlining a book. But and maybe I'm currently working on another book, and I'm adding elements of an outline, but it's more or less the same way I'm doing this one or did this one. And so, yeah, I just again, it was a journey, and as he moved on, what else would he run into? And in New Orleans, there's all kinds of interesting things to run into. So it was fairly easy to write, really.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the things, a couple of things that really stood out for me about the book. First and foremost, it's a very diverse cast of characters that were they all in place from the beginning, or was it kind of like each gradually decided to show up and say, John, I want you to include me in this story? And I also want to ask, were there characters when you started that you made a point of, okay, I have to include somebody like this? Or did you just suddenly get inspired by like, oh, this character is not working. I want to, if I change them around and like make a, 45, 90-degree turn,
Right.
and I can take advantage of that.
Yes. Well, the opening of the book is in a cigar shop, and the people in that cigar shop are real people. I know
Hmm.
the chef and the cigar shop owner and the cop. That's not their real names in the book, but those are real people. And so the first line of the book came from a chef who's down there, uh, and I just really like the opening line. And so, yeah, most a lot of that is, well, I can't say it's all not, I, a lot of the characters were that I based on real people in New Orleans. And the only character that changed was Miriam. Originally, she was a Creole bartender. I would see every now and then down in New Orleans when I went down there, and but then she changed into Miriam, and that's the only character that really morphed, so to speak.
Oh, wow. Okay. Very
Yeah.
interesting. Um, I also wanted to ask, so, the main character, we talked about this a little bit, Jim, he experiences a kind of a spiritual reawakening. So,
Mhm.
how important was it to you to portray that? And how was it to bring the reader along with his journey in terms of the writing? I mean, because you have a lot of him, a lot of self-reflection and also
Yeah.
kind of his inner monologue. And so, I mean, was it a challenge for you to convey that from your head onto the page and kind of like this is what I'm going for?
Um, well, a lot of people read this and they say, "Is this an autobiography?" Because I am a lawyer, although I didn't quit my job. Um, and so you can't help but you add your experiences into your writing. But it wasn't really difficult to write from his point of view because I think a lot of people have Jim traits of Jim in them.
Hmm.
They're kind of lost and they're looking for certainty um, and then my I think my favorite book, I haven't read it in like 4 years, was Huckleberry Finn. And I
Hmm.
love the aspect of traveling down the river and meeting people and so again I go back to the whole idea of a journey rather than a river. Jim is traveling through the French Quarter and then uptown New Orleans. So I hope I answered your question. I'm not sure.
A little bit, a little bit. Actually, I did want to touch on that a little bit as well. Is that, as we talked about earlier, this is one of those stories where the setting and the location almost becomes a character unto itself. So in
Right.
this case, the city of New Orleans. So what was your experience giving the story and the characters kind of like that New Orleans flair, kind of like making it really feel like this is set here?
Um, well, I've been there. I went to law school down in Mississippi, and I was familiar with New Orleans in that context. But when through my job as a lawyer, I was down there a lot. I can't even. There's so many times I've been down there, and so I just really got to know the city very well from the accents to what the local favorites are, and different streets. And I made a point. I don't know if it became tedious, but I was very specific on which streets he was on and where he
Oh,
was
I did notice there was a lot of detail. I was thinking that like how much research did you do? But I guess if you're really familiar with it, you probably can identify a lot of the main roads and just need a map to
right.
like, okay, here's that little side street, 3 blocks away type of thing.
And those that I didn't know, I went on Google Earth. I just made sure that it was all accurate. And so yeah, and most of the research I did, I guess, the would be on hurricanes, and
Mm.
because that's you know, another character in the story, um, and so I researched some. Actually, I did probably more than I'm yeah, I did a fair amount of research, but
Hmm.
most of it was on hurricanes and things of that nature. Though.
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. One of the things I also enjoyed was, I guess you'd call it the compactness of the story, that a majority of it takes place. I want to say it's like a 24 to 36 hour window,
Right.
because we've got Jim arriving in New Orleans and kind of introducing a lot of the supporting characters, and then the hurricane hits, spoiler,
Yeah.
and a lot of the story takes place over that, and you definitely incorporate the hurricane as part of it.
Right.
Um, and I wonder,
And I'm sorry, Paul. Some people think that the hurricane represents some kind of,
like
some
a supernatural
internal
force.
conflict. And I thought, that's actually a good thought. I didn't have that in mind, but I like that idea.
Sometimes a storm is just a storm.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I would say, was it as you were developing the story, or was it your original idea to have it set during a hurricane, or was it you thought, after Katrina? Did you think, then again, do I want to put people through this again? I mean, was
Right.
it challenging to, I guess, were you concerned that having the story set during a hurricane in New Orleans, that it would dredge up a lot of negative feedback
Yeah,
about it?
I did think about that. And, at the beginning, I think I said that, time had dulled the sharpest edges of Katrina memories. And so I think, the people came back. And I was mindful of that. And I did pay respect to that, that you couldn't blame the people of New Orleans for being a bit fidgety when the winds picked up.
Sure.
And I did, you know, include in the book the type of suffering that people went through. And to tell you the truth, but I don't really know how I worked the hurricane in. It just, I can't remember, frankly. It was a little while back. But yeah, and I made a point, and I made it wasn't a full on assault, right? It seemed to
Hmm.
be stop and go. And so enough said where the characters could actually talk.
Hmm.
I needed some quiet time where you could fill in dialogue. If it was just a full blown hurricane, then you can't hear anything. Or so, and he had to make his way through all these places in the French Quarter. It would be better if there was a fits and starts to the storm.
Yeah,
So
and what I thought was a really nice detail was that you have all these different reactions to, oh, there's a storm coming, this storm is here. Some people like, I'm getting out of town right away, and some said,
right,
I'm gonna stick it out. And as we were talking before we started recording, like my wife and I went to New Orleans a couple of years after Katrina, and the cab driver from the airport, he was even like pointing out on some houses, like you can see like where the water line
oh
was,
yeah,
like 6 feet up on the house. And
right,
he said that bridge that wasn't there anymore, and then they just
oh
finished
yeah,
rebuilding that type of thing. So I guess, I mean, because you have a story set in New Orleans at this particular point in time, that you want to also incorporate, a little sense of realism. It's not just, it's all voodoo and Christianity
right,
conflict. It's kind of like,
right.
this city went through this hell before.
Well, and the thing, Paul, is I have a little bit of experience with that because our firm did a pro bono project the summer after Katrina. Uh, in order for people to get these grants, FEMA relief, they had to prove that they owned the houses. And a lot of these houses, like in the Ninth Ward, they'd passed down. There was no paperwork,
Hmm.
so that we had to go in there and treat it as if the owner had died without making a will. We had to trace all these people. They've changed the law since then, but we had to trace all these people back to make sure that they in fact own the property. So we were down there the summer after, and it was still just a it was raw. There was a lot of damage, and like you said, there was you could see the water lines, and it was just eye opening. But
Mhm.
so yeah, I wanted I incorporated all that into my thought processes when I was writing the book.
Okay, and just a quick reminder, we are talking about John Robert Still's book, Intercessor. Uh,
And
actually,
my by the
people are
way,
going to
my good
yes.
friend Louis Cadetti did the cover. He painted that. So
Oh yeah, it's a great painting. Yeah,
yeah.
we when we were there, we got a really nice piece of like New Orleans architecture-ish painting, Fred Jackson Square by one of the street artists, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
hanging up, I
See
think, in
that?
the next room over there.
That's
Uh,
great stuff out there now.
so I wanted to ask, so while you were working on the story, did you ever like maybe find yourself hitting not necessarily writer's block, but kind of like, okay, I don't like the way this storyline is going, or this character, no, I don't like how they're developing. Did you ever have to, backtrack and drastically change something or give it a little tweak?
Yeah. Yes, I did. There was nothing. There were tweaks, not no major rewrites, but I had to go back and make sure that this character doesn't seem this just seems out of character with this character, so I'd have to
Sure,
go back
sure.
and rewrite that part of it. And some of it I would have to, in terms of just New Orleans. Okay, if he goes here, then he can't go here. So I have to, I had to reroute him, so to speak,
Mm,
reroute the narrative to make it fit. Because as you know, as you've seen the book, that it all comes together, and a lot of that is the things he experiences are based on where he goes, which I mean that's yeah, but and so I had to do that, and so yeah, I did a little bit of backtracking and filling in and changing, so to speak.
Okay, one of the things I also wanted to ask you about, and it just suddenly decided to pop out of my head. I'm sure it'll pop in a second. It was about the characters. That one of the things with, my thing is screenwriting, and they always say that every character in your story, no matter if it's the main character or just someone who's in only in one scene, that they are some aspect of of the writer's personality. Now, as you said, the main character in your book is a lawyer from North Carolina who comes to New
Right,
Orleans,
right.
and I don't want to say is that where the comparisons or the similarities end, but you have Jim, who's the main character, and you have all these other characters over the course of the story. Do some of them represent a reflection of your personality, or something that is a little bit, it's very John-ish? I mean, as you were
Yes,
developing it, did you think, or did you make a point of having characters that were nothing like you and just think, okay, this is what I would be like. This is a total 180 on that.
right, right. Well, in some ways, Jim is a lot braver than I am, but in other ways, Jim's tendency to doubt himself is definitely one of my traits. And so uh, again, he did face some really horrific circumstances, and came through them, and so um, I don't know that I could do a lot of what he did. But he was a victim. He really didn't have much choice in the matter. Many of the experiences he goes through. Um, I liked that there was Hayes in there. He was kind of the
Hmm.
comic relief, and I know people like him. I guess maybe a little. I have a little bit of him and me.
Okay.
Um, uh, but mainly it's Jim. I mean, I'm writing from his point of view and as a lawyer, because I do refer to the law, the practice of law a lot, and then how it intertwines, and mostly Jim, and I guess a little bit of Hayes.
Okay, and you'll have to read the book to get a better
Yeah,
sense of what John is talking about. I have to say, I was a little bit surprised about the ending. So there were things that I was expecting to happen, did not, or that they did not turn out a certain way, that they took a left turn and did
right.
not see that one coming. So it's a two-part question. So the first part is, when you started working on the story, did you know how it was going to end? And as you were writing it, did you figure, okay, that ending is not going to work. I need to change it to accommodate what has happened over the course of the story? And also, you talked earlier about how the characters tell you what they need to happen. Is that kind of what happened here, or was it kind of like John is the one in charge and he's going to make sure these things happen?
Yes, yeah, I did have the ending in mind, and you probably figured out where that ending would have been. I mean, in terms of a grand finale,
Mm.
and it. I got to that point, and it just and I without I don't really want to give it away, but based on just the his experience of relearning his faith and finding some of the just his belief that he had in his childhood. He needed to um, he just needed to go further, and
Hmm.
there were still questions that remained, and um, again, I'm trying not to give it away. So
No, sure, sure.
yeah, but yeah, I had the ending in mind, and then I blew past that ending and ended up somewhere. And in terms of the and you can just stop me anytime if I'm talking too much. I don't want
No,
to.
it's fine. It's fine. It's your
Okay.
book.
Okay. The the ending, the surprise. I Some people figured it out before. Again, not to give it away. Some people figured out the ending a little bit farther in the book. Some people didn't. And I kind of left that up in the air as to what that ending was and who the. If you understand what I'm saying, who the particular,
Oh yeah,
the ending
I
is.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
And
and I don't.
the thing is, I think there are several endings to the book, to the story. There,
Right,
because Jim, again, as we talked about, meets all these different characters, and
right.
so a lot of the subplots and the storylines, some of them wrap up, and some of them wrap up in a way that, like I said, I was not expecting. And so, and there were a few of the main storylines that do wrap up, and some of them are that's a very satisfying ending, and there are also a few that actually raise a few more questions.
Yeah,
And I mean,
right.
was it your intent to do that, or did it just kind of like did all the pieces just suddenly come together and you realize, and that's your light bulb moment, like, aha, this would work out even better than what I originally had planned.
Yes, the latter. What you're saying that, but
Okay.
true. And yeah, I try to. And people say, "Well, is there going to be a sequel?" Because and I'm not planning on writing one, but because things are there. Some of the storylines maybe or the characters may be not completely tied up, so to
Hmm.
speak. But um, yeah, as I was writing, yeah, the ending came to me in as I was writing. Frankly, I mean, I went back and changed the ending a couple of times. So that's the beauty of writing. You can go back
Yeah,
and
yeah,
change it instead of
exactly. So just two real quick questions. The first one is the book is Intercessor. So people are going to say, what does that mean? Because I even had to
okay.
look it up after I was done.
Yeah, I could not think of. I didn't name it until I'd written it. I could not think of a name. And intercessor obviously means when you enter. Not obviously because a lot of people, but it means when you intercede for someone. Like you for example, say you're praying for intercession. Like um, help me intercede, not mediate, but certainly will you pray for me? And without giving it away, that I think that maybe the title might give it away too much, but it means that's what happens in the book. There's a lot of there's intercession that occurs, through his prayers and stumbling along. He has someone basically watching over and interceding for him.
Hmm.
Um, so it's a word you don't come across that much. So I understand that.
That's true. You definitely do not. You had mentioned that you're working on a new book, but you also said that a lot of people had responded very positively and favorably to Hayes, and I just can't help but think like uh, a, a a novel about I don't know, sassy lawyer in New Orleans who originally was comic relief. It just seems like it's just ripe for
Yeah,
putting pen to paper on that one.
yeah. He would he was very irreverent, and I think he kept things light uh, and the book is not to proselytize. It was one man's journey, and things he was experiencing himself. It's not so. And Hayes added another dimension to that.
Hmm.
He was irreverent without being disrespectful, but I thought that he he would throw these zingers in that I would, just looking at it and poking fun. And so I thought that was just a good way to play off at Jim and to,
Mhm.
again, it was hopefully something that added a little bit of comic relief to the book, and because it got pretty heavy at times.
It certainly did, and definitely I would agree about Hayes. So, can you tell us a little bit about your new book, or is it still just very under wraps?
Well, it's this time it's set in the low country of South Carolina. Same kind of thing, very mysterious, live oaks and Spanish moss and all this. And it's starts out as a treasure, treasure hunt. There's rumor of a treasure being discovered somewhere, and there's this map, and as they're looking for this treasure, our characters come across all kinds of interesting experiences in that area of the country. You had Revolutionary War soldiers, Civil War. In the 1500s, you have the Spanish conquistadors, and so you have this really rich history um, that lends a lot of mystery to it. And so I'm trying to combine the historical elements, with the fictional parts of it, and
Hmm.
and again, it's a journey. This time they're looking for something, and as they are looking, they're discovering a lot of other things that will change their lives. So I don't know if that's a really good description, but that's what I'm working on.
Well, I love a good historical fiction book,
Yeah,
so it
I've
it
had to do
sounds it
so.
sounds great to me.
And Paul, this one I've done so much research on. I've got read so many books, and so it's not coming nearly as easily as the first one.
Okay,
So,
that is great. Again, we've been talking with John Robert Still about his book Intercessor. If you love a good supernatural thriller and you love the city of New Orleans and you don't mind a little religious aspects thrown
there you
in,
go.
this is
Yeah.
definitely the book for you. John, where can people find out more about you and your book?
Well, the book is available Amazon, Barnes and Noble, iTunes, wherever fine books are sold, as they
Okay.
say. And I do have also an Audible version.
Oh,
That's
okay.
it was actually a finalist for an Audie. An Audie Award is like an Emmy for Audible books.
Hmm.
I hired the narrator, and so I got to go up to New York and go to the ceremony. I didn't win, but I was a finalist, so
It's still
it's also
good.
available in that format as well.
Do you have a website or can people find you on any social media
I
platforms?
I have a uh, I did have a website. I'm in the process of changing it, and they can find me on you can find Intercessor on Facebook, I guess. And I'm really my wife is helping with all the social media stuff. I'm just really a luddite in that regard. Uh, but yeah, it's just Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook right now. And I don't have the exact addresses. I'm sorry, but if you type in Intercessor and my name, you'll be able to find it.
Okay. Well, we usually put the links up, so I'll track
Oh,
them
I'm
down
sorry.
somehow. Oh, no problem. It's not a
I
problem
can
at
send
all.
that to you later. Actually, I can send
Oh,
that to you.
it's fine. I do research too. I'm also a writer,
Okay.
so I'm used to that sort of thing. Again, we've been talking with John Robert Still
Yeah.
about his book Intercessor. John, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you, Paul. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm
Oh,
glad
my
you read it. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'm glad you got a lot of chicory,
We did.
from your
We did.
trip.
We talked about that before we started recording too. We always have cans of Cafe Du Monde coffee in the pantry because it's delicious.
Yes.
Uh, all right, viewers and listeners, if you enjoyed today's show, please hit like. Feel free to leave a comment and subscribe for social media. You can check out my screenwriting blog. That's maximumz.blog. On Twitter, I'm at maximum_Z, and the show is at podcast CWL. I'm on Blue Sky and Instagram at Pez Screenwriting, PEZ, and the show is also on Blue Sky, again, podcast CWL. You can check out my Go Ahead and Ask books on Amazon, the ones about screenwriting and pie. And we're recording this a few days before my crowdfunding for my short film Shecky wraps up on Indiegogo. So even though it's probably wrapped up by the time you're seeing this, or hearing it, check it out. I think we're still doing you can still donate after the fact. So please check it out. Indiegogo, the film is Shecky. Like I said, that's John. I'm Paul. This has been the Creative Writing Life podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and most importantly, go write something.